So we've got a new audio setup, and what that means is, so 2 shows ago we had problems where I had I I had problems with my default audio settings, and my webcam was being used of all things, and it's a whole cascade of dumb circumstances where it ended up being the device being used for the entire show with nobody figuring it out until like I did the post production stuff and had to discover how to do audio engineering to clean up that mess. And it kind of worked. Anyhow, the show after that, so last show, Minion had an open mic and was mouth breathing throughout the show. So I only noticed that because I don't hear him as well as I could. Like a person with headphones on would probably hear him quite well. And so doing post production, I got to hear him all over the place. And that show hasn't been uploaded yet. I'm probably going to do a lot of work on it. Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow certainly, and get that uploaded. And I'm going to have to go through and do, I don't know. I don't know. There are these awkward moments of silence, right? You know, between sentences, which I do a lot. And those are moments where the background sound can be heard, both on my end and in that show, hopefully for the last time, on Minion's end. But with Minion mouth breathing, I could actually capture that particular bit and try to clean up, I don't know, maybe the entire show. It's not a great solution. I'm going to have to experiment, but we'll see how that goes. I'm not looking forward to that. So what we've changed is we are both, it's an idea that I had before, is we both have our own audio setup where I'm recording a track locally. He's recording a track locally. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 tracks and I'm going to mix them together and shift them as needed. They should be lined up well. And then that can be like down mixed into one stereo channel and then processed from there. So it's going to be one extra step technically and more hard drive space technically. But it's what has to be done so that we now have the ability to normalize or noise reduce or what have you, both speakers completely independently. So this is the kind of stuff that I would normally share in segment 3, but I'm always excited to talk about this stuff right away. Anyhow, we don't have a regular show, so I'm just going to talk about something random that I have in front of me. So I've joked before that I'm drinking Diet Pepsi, and I'm not drinking it necessarily because I'm trying to lose weight. If I was trying to lose weight, I probably wouldn't be eating so much fatty bacon, which I mean, I stopped for a little while, but my mood went kind of crap, so I'm on bacon again. I'm going to talk to a doctor about like, do I need a prescription for bacon? Is there like medical grade bacon that I can get myself some like specially weighed cubes of bacon that I fried. So I'm drinking Pepsi just because I just want less sugar in my life in general. It's one thing that I can get used to, and it's one of many dominoes, I suppose, that I could play with on. And if I wanted to do other things more seriously, this is one thing I would not have to eliminate from my diet. I wouldn't have to. Actually don't really drink soda at all, so this is kind of unnecessary because normally I just drink tea and occasionally I drink coffee. At any rate, what was I talking about? So that's the Diet Pepsi thing. So I decided I wanted to try Diet Coke, of all things. And what I knew is that there's Diet Coke and there's Coca-Cola Zero. And then when I went looking, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do a taste test. So I'm going to buy it all at the same time. I'm going to try it all back to back. And I found that they had Coca-Cola Stevia. And I already knew about Stevia, and I think it's monk root. These are I think stevia is not the name of the plant, but it's like a part. This is an actual plant part, in the same way that sugar from cane sugar is just the natural stuff. Stevia is the natural stuff from a different kind of plant, and stevia is it's really useful. I think everybody should look into stevia, because stevia, it's not 0 calorie, but it is, and it's not sugar. So it has a 0 glycemic index. So that means that when your body has stevia introduced to it, your body does not perceive it like other foods. Your body doesn't perceive it. So in the same way, your body wouldn't produce insulin for if you were on a ketogenic diet, like if you were on the Atkins diet or something like this, where you have an extraordinarily low, you have like no simple sugars, very low carbs. Your body's getting energy from protein and fat, and make sure you exercise or you die, this kind of stuff. Stevia is useful for that kind of person because it does not trigger insulin production. And this is also important, obviously, for people who are diabetic. So stevia is sweet. It's not as sweet as sugar. So I was intrigued at this because stevia is natural, and so you don't have to have aspartame, which a lot of people are rather offended at. And so, hey, I thought I'd try it. I'm looking at the ingredients quick, and it's got no aspartame in it. Of course, it's got caffeine in it. And I went through the entire list. So I went Diet Coke. Diet Coke is it's disgusting. It's disgusting. I hate it. I don't like it. And I took a little sip of that and went, okay, I don't like that. Okay, Coke Zero. It was revolting. Like, it was not quite as awful as Diet Coke. It was really revolting in some other new mystical way. That's why it's a separate product. I think it justifies itself being a separate product by being differently awful. And then I tried the stevia, and the thing about stevia is, and I actually have a bag of stevia, and it has a taste. People say that it doesn't. People say that it's just like I don't think they say it's a 1-to-1 replacement for sugar, but it may well be. I wouldn't even call it sweet either. It's kind of in the direction of sweet, but there's something wrong about it, and it's got a taste. And when added with Coke, it is wrong. It's wrong in that it's a Coke that's wrong, and it's wrong because it's just a really odd flavor. It's not quite chemically, but it is off. And so I went through. So that was a taste of each, and then went back and it tasted them all, and then I went back and it tasted them all. And it's me, right? So I actually couldn't finish any of them. They were just terrible. And then I went with, okay, well, and I went. I'm drinking the Diet Pepsi again, and this is great. This is great. This does not taste like diet anything. I think maybe what I should do, to be honest with myself, maybe what I should do is just get like regular Pepsi and then do a taste test between those. But then I might not like Diet Pepsi anymore, so I'm not sure I'm going to risk that. And it could just be something simple, like I don't know what the ingredients will be. Like, the magic is different, whatever the heck. But this has plenty of aspartame in it as well. If I can actually read the can. Let me put another light on. 124 milligrams per 355 milliliters. So the entire can is 355 milliliters. Sorry if you're American. 124 milligrams. So what does a Diet Coke have? Does it even say? Oh, it's really fine print. 185. 185 milligrams per 500 milliliters. Oh, I'm not going to do the math. Okay, so whatever. It's not a huge difference. So I don't think it's the aspartame that's the big difference in the taste experience. But anyhow, that was interesting to learn, and it cost me more than I wanted to spend. But like I said about the garden hose nozzle thing, sometimes, I mean, in this case, I'm spending money on purpose. I'm spending money on purpose, and I knew how much I was going to spend up front, and I knew what I would get out of it. And okay, maybe I have a story, which is actually useful. If you could pay money for some interesting life experiences and having stories, that's actually worth it. So I've got that, but I also learned a little bit more about what I like, in this case, what I don't like, and why. And it only cost me, for 3 drinks that I didn't like, right? And the experience, it's not like I got sick or anything like that. That is a different kind of experiment. You have to know what you're getting into for something to be like, yeah, I'm going to eat cake for dinner and see what that's like. I recommend that. I really do. But there are consequences to that. So do it on a Friday night when you don't have plans. And that might be like, you'll have that friend that says, oh, you should really try this. And it's some disgusting dish that you've never had before and you don't like the smell of. It's like it's escargot or something. And you're like don't, that would be a fine waste of money for the experience if it's not too much money for you and if the experience threatens to be good, like if you're bonding with a good friend of yours, right? But there could be terrible consequences, like you being so disgusted as to want to leave the restaurant or need to go use the bathroom or something, and just know what you're getting into. In this particular case, I was at home and everything. I was perfectly prepared to go and suffer through drinking a little bit terribly. But it's not like these are gonna. I mean, Coke is Coke, right? So it's acid. And my phone is bugging me. Hey, my phone. I spent forever just to try to figure out how to make my phone give me the kind of notifications I want. Why, thank you. Now it's on airplane mode. Sorry, that's going in my checklist. That's actually something I want to go watch. That is a fine segue, because that was something else that I wanted to talk about. Is I've been fiddling with my phone a lot. I'm pretty much cool. I'm chill. I'm just going and making sure I know how to use all the applications I got. And one of the necessary things, one of the necessary problems to solve is, how do you make sure that you can, how would I put it? You can make good on your obligations. Okay, so you have schedules and stuff like that. You have schedules and you plan things. You have alarm clocks and timers. These things exist in your life, and they should only exist in your life riding on the back of certain responsibilities that you choose to take. Yeah, okay, technically you choose to be employed and all this kind of subtlety. But if you've got plans for the weekend or something like that, you should be able to somehow have it be recorded. Even if it's only in your memory, it should happen. And if you use a phone or something like this as an assistance for your memory, really, your phone needs to be able to appropriately nag you at the appropriate times, right? So it going off just now is a perfect example of this not being an appropriate time, because I checked. I know I don't have anything planned, right? In fact, what I'm doing now, this show was scheduled, but not on my phone, which I'm probably going to have to do. Hey, let me write that down. let me write that down. Okay, pen and paper. Here we go. I'm not going to clickety clack right now. So what am I going to say here? So show scheduling on phone. Yeah, I totally want to talk about using a pen. So the thing about having all kinds of alarms and schedules and calendars and stuff like that is, much of the time, this is it depends on the kind of person you are. And the thing is, you might have practices that are inappropriate for you, and so it's something you need to pay attention to. You can't play pretend like there's one universal system for doing everything, and that you can be told it and that will fix you. That's wrong. That's always going to be wrong. And so it ends up being you kind of stealing from other people's ideas and making something for yourself. You learn how to do it. And of and one of the things is you will find that that you might be highly interested in building a schedule and maybe following a schedule, and you might build up a lot around that idea, and then it just becomes this big, overwhelming, tyrannical thing. So, for example, if I had you write down a list of all the things that you were interested in doing and getting done, stuff you want, all the obligations for today, oh, I need to clean my bathroom and I need to do the laundry, and you just build list after list after, and it just gets big, and it'll start saying things like, well, I should research the price of a new hard drive because I need that for the. And if you start adding explanations, it's really terrible. But that list, as soon as it starts looking further into possibilities, further into the future, that list becomes oppressive, like really deeply oppressive. So you end up needing to know how to push certain tasks away, including pushing the full description of certain tasks. Push them so far away that they're already remembered. So you can forget. So it's okay for you to not know anything but what's in front of you. So just like I was talking about the checklists in a previous show, you would have a to-do list that is constrained so that you can forget everything else. It's being remembered by your system. And so if you were to use something like a phone and you get a calendar app or something like that, and you fill it, you have to be really careful about not looking at the monthly view, for example. And you have to know, you have to do things like schedule in breaks if you get overwhelmed, rather than put off whole tasks, do a little bit of it, because doing a little bit of it is still a success. Even if you have to reschedule the full thing, like you might be dumb enough to put a to-do item like clean house, and that okay, well, you're not doing that in one day, especially if you've got other stuff to do. So you might have that terrible to-do item that says clean house, and then you look at that and go, okay, well, 15 minutes, I guess, and maybe you get burnt out, maybe you get distracted, maybe you realize that there are more important things to do in life rather than just finishing cleaning your house, so you do other things. And that to-do item never gets the little check mark that makes you feel good. And you end up feeling like you're pushing it off. Well, that's really what needs to happen is it stays there. You get one little tick mark that says, I spent 1 unit of effort on this. Doesn't have to mean much. And then reschedule it for the day after. And you do a little bit more. So that one tick mark, you don't have to say that you did just the bathroom, right? You just put a tick mark in, and that's fine. And then tomorrow, maybe you add 1 or 2 more tick marks. And maybe that represented you vacuuming the hallways, and maybe you wipe some counters down or something. Your to-do list isn't your diary of accomplishments necessarily. There are ways of doing that, which, I've talked about on my own time, but I might go through in the show to talk about how to manage a journaling to-do system. But again, this is something that worked out for me that I recommend, but I don't know if it would work very well for other people. I think it wouldn't translate particularly well to a phone, because so far I haven't found many apps on a phone that are any good at all. Like, this is an entirely different paradigm, and people are pretending like humans work differently. So everything you do on phones is just off by a lot. It's very, very odd. Anyhow, I'm pretty sure I lost my train of thought in there somewhere. So the problem, the problem I was facing is I needed my phone to tell me when somebody texts me when I'm away, right? So maybe I leave this at my desk and I go and I use the bathroom or something, and I get a text, and I come back, and when I come back, I don't go to my phone because I wasn't using my phone. I was using my desk. My phone happened to be over there, but I'm not going to go and compulsively look at my phone. every time that I've been away for like, oh, did I forget? What I want is my phone to, at some point when I return to my desk, just occasionally ping me again and just say, hey, something happened. It doesn't know what, which is probably for the best. And so that if I'm sitting there doing something and I happen to have fuzzed out, I went somewhere or whatever, my phone will bug me again. So I can go and I can look at that. And that's not actually built into Android. That it's not even built into any of the software except for one program called Simple Calendar Pro. And I don't think the Pro version is the one that has it. I think they've got a free version that also has it. It's just a chime repeat. And so you could have a calendar entry and set it to set an alarm off, and then it'll keep repeating. Awesome. But for everything else, nothing else is actually capable of doing that. So I had to figure that out. And then you have to make sure that all these other alarms and stuff will actually work. And I know it sounds weird, but you can set things to happen on Android and have it not actually happen. And that's because there are some power saving modes and battery usage things and whatnot that might actually there's a priority problem where some apps simply will not be able to know certain things at certain times, and so some timer applications won't work. So for anybody here that's actually got that problem, the way you solve that is when you tap and hold an icon on your home folder or your apps list, you get the menu with the different options. Usually there's a little eye. You click that, you get the list of attributes, the info for that app. And you can click advanced and you can see some more with like the version of the program and stuff like that. But then you can click power options. And there's an option for doing battery optimization. And this is very important for some apps. It's battery optimization, and there's one other feature. So battery optimization might mean that when this app isn't in the foreground, and when your phone, so when the app is not even running, quote unquote running, so it's just kind of in the background somewhere. It's not a task that you have open and you switch to your web browser or something. It's not around. If it's not there, if it's not like that, and your phone has its screen turned off, that app might not be given priority enough to actually run and set off an alarm. So that's a problem that hits a bunch of programs. And so you can actually set that battery optimization feature on or off. Double check and triple check if you've got a lot of reliance on these calendar items. Make a bunch of tests going forward into the future. And if it doesn't bother you, have them repeat, and then just make sure you do your regular day and double check and see if everything is working properly. And there's one other feature, I think it's new in Android 10, where you can actually deny background battery use from applications. And I'm not entirely sure what the consequence of that is. But I actually was really aggressive in setting that for a lot of stuff. And okay, so what that does is that means if you're not using the app and maybe you've turned your phone, you've turned your screen off, that the app is unable to wake your phone up as a start. It does not operate. And there's a whole lot of apps that I don't want to, like, it's not their job to be running when I'm not using it. I don't like that idea. That's a rather confusing concept. And so, like, why would you want your calculator app to be able to use the battery when your phone is quote unquote off? Well, it doesn't need to because you're not using it, so it doesn't matter. So you can turn that stuff off, and it's probably meaningless if you've got high quality apps that don't try to do nefarious things. But you can also set it explicitly for things like, well, what if you already have Twitter configured so that it doesn't send you notifications? Because That's the way you have it set up. That's the way you use it. Well, you can also have a setting where you entirely deny it background battery use because it doesn't matter. You only care about Twitter for that kind of person. You would only care about Twitter if you were using Twitter, not for anything else, not for notifications, not for waking you up with an alarm whenever somebody retweets you, nothing like that. And so I wish I could tell you offhand where that setting is, but if you look through, I think it's a raw permissions issue, something weird like that, where you can actually set that. Anyhow, if there's somebody that's really interested, I could probably go find that. But the information is out there. So yeah, I mentioned getting my pen, which reminds me. And I always wondered why it was mostly an Apple user thing. People would talk about iPads with using these little digital pens, these little writing pens, and people learning to draw digitally and stuff like that. And I mean, I've seen those like speed painted MS Paint videos and stuff like that, and I have a hard time really respecting completely digitally created art. I usually think of that stuff because I'm old. I usually think of that stuff in terms of the post-production work when doing real art, then scanning it in, bringing it into a digital format, and then doing post-production cleanup, quote-unquote photoshopping. That's how I've traditionally thought of it. I'm learning that a little bit, the new way of doing things a little bit more. And I totally get it. Yeah, it's legitimate and it's art and all that. And so I went looking to that stuff. And so the first thing that I noticed is that it's very, very, that the Apple products, the iPad and the iPhone, have some really, really good quality, like multi-pressure pens. So you've got like 1,000 different pressure sensitivities for a pen and so you can actually draw, like legitimately draw. And this kind of thing doesn't really exist on Android at all. And I found one, but it's only for one particular phone brand or something like that. And it's got its own pen. And so I was researching all of this technology, and it's I mean, it's really interesting stuff. And it's one of these, well, it'd be nice if I had a pen so that I can do handwriting on a phone, which seems incredibly dumb. But maybe I could not carry my little notebook around. And I could jot notes. That would be kind of awesome. I could replace my regular pen with one of these digital pens. And so I'd be doing what was on pen and paper really easily, but many hundreds of dollars worth of equipment is what I'd be doing, what I'd be replacing it all with. So, I mean, high-tech solutions. I was curious. I wanted to learn about if this was possible or what was going on and prices and all this kind of stuff. And my, are the pens really inexpensive. Like really, really inexpensive. But the thing is, they're basically like fine point replacements for your fingertip is what you get for Android. They're not very good. They are one thickness of line with no sensitivity. And people are raving about, oh, this one can draw a line that isn't jagged. Or this one can draw lines that aren't like broken up. Like, oh, wow, that's the feature that... And yet, if I look at the more fancy stuff, it's like, yeah, there's some magical stuff. And then you have to think about whether or not it's like a Bluetooth device, whether it acts like a mouse, whether it's got buttons on it that you can click to do stuff, if you can configure those buttons. All this kind of like, oh, this one has a magnetic attached recharging and blah, blah, blah. So lots of choices there. Ultimately speaking, I'm probably not going to get one of these things because, I mean, what's the point? Really, what's the point? as okay, I'd probably be hammering away on a typewriter because I'm the type, but I mean, I do like pen and paper a lot. It's something I discovered about myself, and I I do I am trying to integrate certain ideas into a phone because it's there is more power available when you're trying to do certain things on a computing device. So the idea of just jotting notes, for example, a phone doesn't offer anything for that. It offers a terrible experience for trying to poke stuff in, fat finger things in, with some terrible autocorrect and an awkward interface. And what happens if you're 3 words in and you found a spelling mistake back there? Well, you have to like fat finger your way through that word. And oh, I hope you got a replacement virtual keyboard so you can actually cursor left and right properly. And and it's an awful experience compared to a pen and paper. But if you're using something like a to-do organizer of some sort, and there are some, what are they called? Ooh, Notecase is an example of this. Oh, I cannot remember the name. But there's a technique for doing mind mapping and some other stuff like that for doing planning, and you can do that kind of thing kind of on pen and paper. But being able to do it digitally, it's like, well, if you wanted to make a database, yeah, you could write your address book, for example, pen and paper. But if you put it on a phone, well, you can now sort by last name or first name, things like this. And you can have tags and you can group them by tag. You can search for things more in a more advanced way. And so if you've got a significant amount of information, then a digital assistant would definitely help. And so the trick for using, I find, for using a phone effectively is identifying the sorts of ways that I do things in a traditional way and staying with it in that way, not pretending like the phone can make my life easier. Like if I needed to make a list of what I need to do today versus tomorrow, punching it into a calendar app is probably the wrong thing to do. Pulling out a little notebook and actually writing it pen and paper, and because I can draw randomly if I want to, I can make little symbols that say things like, do this tomorrow, or I did only a little bit of, or whatever. It doesn't need to be edited and re-edited constantly. It doesn't really go in a calendar. It doesn't really matter when I clean what room in my house. It just matters that I do a little bit of it. And so, like, a text file isn't the right way of approaching that particular solution. But if I wanted something like a grocery list, well, a phone is in the right direction. It's not entirely the right answer, though. So it's in the right direction because if you were to create a list of, let's say you like Kool-Aid. Okay, so Kool-Aid is the powdered mix that you add water and sugar to, and you'd make all kinds of different flavors of drink. And let's say that was totally your thing. And so you make your list of the 8 flavors or whatever the heck exists these days, and you write it in your phone, but you use a special program that helps you. So you can do like, you can note what flavors you like the most, and you can say how much you have left, and you can say, this kind of stuff. So you can go, okay, well, I'm out of orange, and when you're out, you pull your phone out and go, I'm out of orange, and you click the thing, you do the whatever, and you could do the equivalent with a pen and paper and just go, okay, buy orange, or you can put a line through it, or you can, but if you go to the store and you pick it up and you go buy some, and you can go to your phone and go, okay, well, now I have it. Click a thing, and away you go. But you can't undo the line. You'd have to redraw the list if you were to do it pen and paper. So it's kind of inconvenient. And so the phone can actually accomplish certain complex, repeating editing tasks really easily, where you can't really do that pen and paper. It is I've done that. I mean, I'm from before mobile phones, so I've done handwritten lists and just rewrite them every once in a while, and it's fine. It's kind of satisfying to take one old piece of paper that has a whole lot of lines crossed out because you accomplished all those goals, and just rewrite a new one with just like the handful of stuff that's still left. That is actually quite an interesting experience. And then you've got this old piece of paper that you could like put a date on and keep it if you wanted to. So you have like a little binder full of, this is the mess that was this month. And if you want to keep a journal kind of that way, that's actually a really odd way of scrapbooking your own life. And that goes into the pen and paper thing that I wanted to mention that maybe I'll mention next segment or something. But yeah, so it's got certain competencies, and you have to know what you should be using a phone for, portability, etc., and what you should be using pen and paper for. And if you're the type that needs to do certain things, don't pretend like you can do everything on a phone when you should just go and get a pen and paper. And it's not that expensive to go and get, like, think of the trees, right? Don't use paper. Well, okay, I mean, stop using so much battery power. Electricity comes from somewhere. There are consequences for having mined all of the material, build the phone, get the phone to you, using the phone, right? There's consequences to everything you use, but the paper that you would use does come from a renewable source, so that argument is pretty bad. So have a physical pen and paper. If it's not, I mean, you needing to mop your kitchen is not a bit of personal information that needs to get encrypted like it would be on a phone. Like, this is pretty boring stuff. I can understand why you would want your like contacts lists and stuff like that encrypted, in case somebody steals your phone. But you don't really have an equivalent for that in case somebody steals your notepad, because you're not going to really be putting anything particularly interesting on it anyway. I'm looking at it now. I appreciate that you have a countdown timer. I really do. It doesn't need the leading 0, so I guess, do you want me to edit the Lua script that generates that, I suppose? And I can see if I can correct that, so it can only count down from. I guess it doesn't really matter, right?
Because
it shouldn't show the 0 if there's a 0.
Because I have to edit the script myself.
You had?
I didn't notice, but there's a start and stop timer. So when I fiddled with it the first 2 times, I sat there watching. Why is the timer still staying there? It doesn't change.
Well, so it's a little weird. So we'll have to see what happens when it's 9 minutes, because when we never say 0 hours and 10 minutes, right? Which is what it has right now. We would say 10 minutes. And I'm wondering if when it hits 9 minutes, is it going to say 0 hours and 09 minutes? Which is,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we also wouldn't do that. So there's some nuance there to be improved. And
I mean, there's a difference between saying and looking.
No, the thing is, I mean, it's acceptable seeing it on a screen, but it would be nicer if it was a different way, if it was cleaner. But the thing is, it's not even affixed with font, so things are a little bit awkward.
Well, now we'll know, but it's probably going to go 00. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is this? Countdown timer? What I'll do is,
I think it's fine just to leave it alone.
See, this is the 20% time. So when you're out of things to do, and all of your tasks only take up 80% of your brain power, you tend to get bored and reach out to do more stuff. And this is exactly the sort of stuff that would be like, this has been bugging me for a while. Let me just sit down and see what would happen. Maybe it's really easy. Maybe it's an interesting problem. I mean, I've sat down there because I have the time now. A lot of people have the time now. I've had the time to just sit down and take an entire afternoon, like fiddling around with something just to try to make it work. And even though it was a waste of an entire day, and it's just some interesting, better looking thing, it pays off every other time that you're using it. Even if it's not more convenient, it's just a little prettier, or it just instills a certain feeling. It's I love doing that kind of thing. I love doing it. And for me, it just there's a kind of mood playing with all the stuff that I've got when I've tinkered with it myself. You could even put the date with that title card. And I do have on my list making a logo. That should technically be your problem. But maybe I'll fiddle with that. Maybe I'll actually sketch it pen and paper first. But I do know how to do
Logo? I would just make a capital L and then stick the dot at the bottom part of the L.
with the bottom part of the L.
Or make it
It could be like
huh?
the I on its side being lazy.
At the foot of the L. At the foot of the L.
Yeah, I've got some. I just had an idea. Yeah, I've got some ideas that I could fiddle with, and we can probably
Either that or I would just stick the I at the bottom.
do like hire somebody through Fiverr or something like that. Just be like, yeah, we're looking for something like this. Just figure it out, and maybe you might get some interesting ideas.
I guess.
Ask for like, but I've got an idea of like if you made because it's a lowercase I, right? So the L can be a nice big solid straight clean L, classic font and everything, and the I can just be this dude lying down. We'll picture you just kind of sleeping in the hook of the L,
Yeah.
or just sitting there slouching or something, reading a book, looking at a tablet, playing a tablet game, maybe with some little Z's.
Well, I can't right now because the servers. Well, I would be playing on the tablet, except the servers on their end are crying right now.
Oh, I see. It's their fault. But you would. Of course you would.
Of course.
In your mind.
No, not in my mind.
So, for I think it was last show. It's strange because I know I mentioned a whole lot of stuff. I do end up stopping and going and looking things up. If I've talked about something that was recent in my life, it's not that hard. I did actually find sources for all kinds of things. So for most of the time, what I'm doing is as I'm listening through the show and making edits. So I'm trying to clean up the audio as best I can, and I'm trying to note things that I might be able to pull out as a clip and all this kind of stuff. And we're not really using a lot of that information right now, but it'll happen eventually. We can go back into our old stuff, and I've done a whole lot of that work up front so that my future self will look back at this stuff and be helped quite a lot. And so I actually take a lot of notes and stuff, and a lot of these are getting put into the descriptions of the uploads when they're on YouTube. And the descriptions are bad right now because Minion doesn't know what he's doing. Hopefully there will be improvement one day.
Yay, I'm not descriptive.
Fingers crossed. So like the links that are put in the descriptions are not actually clickable. Yeah, okay. So room for improvement. Anyhow, so I remember mentioning the one guy who was stepping away from his open source project because he felt bad about not being able to assist people. I actually found that blog post, found it in my history. I didn't really go looking very hard either. I just kind of bumped into it. I think it was bookmarked in one of my 5 browsers and six. And so I'll have that in the description. And I mentioned schooling. It wasn't for Denmark. It was for Finland. And I've got a link to the video where I learned about that school related stuff. And it's kind of interesting going back. I actually watched the previous show. Like this show I will probably listen to tomorrow. Probably not, because I got more work to do from the previous show, but normally that's the thing I would do. And it's quite interesting because I'll forget what I said like overnight. And so it'll be interesting. And I'm probably going to go back and re-listen to previous shows on kind of a schedule. And there's something that I do fairly regularly for my pen and paper notes that I can talk about when we're back from the break, that involves writing down what you're up to each day and then going and reviewing previous days. Anyhow, so we're coming up on a break. Why don't we take it just slightly early? And we'll be back in, well, now 13 minutes. So I'll see you then. Alrighty, so I actually have notes as to what I wanted to talk about, but I'm not sure if it was the stuff I had already talked about or not, so we're going to check Minion's memory. We had a long weekend last weekend, and so I was away, and I actually had plans pounce on me.
We skipped last season.
I'm a little frazzled since you end up going away for a while, changing your routine, and you're not quite. You need time to ease back into reality, and so my memory's definitely not working right. So I see that we now have a countdown timer during the show to help me know how much time I have left is really what I want to know. I think that's what everybody really needs to know, and that gives us all advance warning so we can know when we're all going to take a break together.
Wait, what?
Sorry?
50. Oh, okay, never mind. I couldn't tell time.
Okay. And I'm wondering if we can have music during that countdown timer. Do it the exact same way you have the intro music, with whatever the heck is going on there. Because it's just dead air right now. And what else? Okay, so I still need to help you with... so this is all Unit 3 stuff, I guess. I
thought this was Unit 2, unless you want to call it early for today.
Well, I mean, we could. Let's see where we can go. I mean, and halfway through this segment, we'll decide.
Okay.
So, how much did I rant about plants? Because I totally went looking further into the gardening thing. It is interesting stuff. What all the nuances to be learned. And now I know I talked offline to Minion. I bored him about this stuff.
I don't recall.
So I'm never going to be filming the front yard, but the backyard is kind of my thing, and that's what I've been thinking about. And we've got problems. Like, by we I mean me, basically. So I've kind of inherited this wreck that I'm allowed to do stuff with. I just don't know how. So I did talk about how I pulled up this dandelion, and I have a water weeder, which honestly everybody should have. But the problem is the soil that's back there, it's not really soil, it's sand. It's sand and rock, and it just so happens that weeds can grow in it, kinda. And good luck digging anything out of that mess. And so I'm trying to water weed it, which is really the only possible thing. If it was regular soil, boy, would this be easy. Man, it would be so nice. The thing is, I'm having to kind of dig and water blast through this stuff, and I pulled out this dandelion. It was like the root of a bush. It was so awful trying to pull this thing out. And I tried a second one, I couldn't do it. And I tried a third one, and I snapped it off. And the thing is, this soil, I can't even take a shovel to this soil. It's so difficult to actually do anything with. So I'm not going to be able to grow like life there. So I'm thinking in terms of, well, what can I do? And I'm learning. So I already understood some of the terms at least. And I've said that when you're interested in a topic, you learn a little bit about it. You have to. There's a language there. There's a language to be learned for all kinds of stuff with gardening. And so there's stuff like, well, there's multiple different kinds of qualities that all come together in different ways to make soil. So the sandy rocky is a kind of property, is one of which is one of the three that's important to understand and possibly to have, depending on where you are and what you want to grow. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's actually true that I should keep the soil. So I was thinking, you just dig it all out and you get that brown stuff and you put that brown stuff there, that soil, then you grow things. Go things in soil. That's how it works. Get rid of bad soil, put in good soil. There's only one kind. Well, okay, there's not. There's apparently more kinds, and there's like pH balance and all. Okay, and then I had to learn about, okay, well, there are climate types and zones, and there's how much sunlight, and is it direct, and what's the drainage, and how much rain do you get, and what. Well, and it's just on and on and on of all these different nuances, and it's fun. That's the thing. If you're, I mean, it's sometimes you just have a problem to solve, and that's what you should do, and you should just like, what is the most effective, the best return on investment, or the lowest maintenance over the long run, or however you work. Maybe you should solve the problem that way. But for me, I just have fun kind of exploring to understand more. And I went looking to see, well, what kinds of plants like that soil? Like, maybe I should think in that direction. Like, okay, maybe the soil isn't bad. Maybe I can add to it to make it more, to make the kind of plant that I like grow there. And well, now what do I do about the weeds? Like, how do I dig them up? How do I, like, how? Because right now, my biggest problem is I need to take whatever is in my yard and change it into something else that I can weed somehow. And so maybe I should just spray. That's kind of a revolting concept for me. Well, maybe, and I went looking, there's something called a ground cover plant. And some people use this class of plant. They plant it at a certain time of year and they just let it kind of dominate their yard. And it's a fairly pretty thing. And it will cover things and it will kind of die off and it'll get buried in snow and maybe it'll pop back up in the spring, maybe, and all this kind of thing. But what it would do is it would suppress weeds and it would add more material content to the soil, because this is life that sprouts up and then dies down. So there's actual material that gets produced through this mechanism. So it actually, these sorts of things can help add like nitrogen or whatever else to your soil. And so some people do this kind of stuff. They think like that. Well, I was looking in that direction for stuff that have kind of like maybe native to our area. That's kind of asking a lot. That likes our particular climate, and I'm looking at that part of the yard. Well, how much sun does it get and at what times of year, and how much rain it does have, and what's the drainage like and the soil type, and blah blah blah. And I actually found I wonder if I can get it right now. Let me look at my notes. How good are my notes? Come on, self, we can do this. What? Oh, ongoing bug. Okay, so what I do is I make bookmarks, and I've got an add-on that lets me right click and just hop to, oh, sorry, I'm using a Firefox variation. And I can actually just search for something, and let me see. Okay, I think I found what I want to plant. And I found a few different things. So there's like, if you go on, so first you need to know your Well, you need to learn your zone. And there's actually an article on Wikipedia about like gardening zones or climate zones. And these are kind of like, it's, I mean, let's face it, it's more subtle than just getting a number because you need to know all kinds of stuff. But generally speaking, like plants will grow where plants will grow. So as long as you understand lighting and soil type, and generally you're good with the zone matching, because a lot of plants are like, oh, this will grow between zones 4 and 7, stuff like that. And if you're somewhere in there, if you're 4, then you need to know that maybe this plant doesn't like the hottest of your hot summers or something like that. And if you know if your plant is, if maybe your zone 7 or something like that, you have to know that plant might not like your coldest winters or something. Like there's stuff like that that you would have to know about. So I went researching, and you just random research on the internet. You ask questions like, well, ground cover plants for sandy soil, right? And I just look through articles, and they'll, and okay, gardeners, just like foodies, they're very big on taking pictures of stuff. So you're going to get a lot of mediocre pictures of all kinds of stuff with funny names of plants you've never heard of, which is fine because you can just look at the pictures like you like you're learning another language and you're just reading a kid's book and it's got pictures of stuff. So you're like, hey, this is pretty, and you look at it and there's some words. It's like you look at this, there's some Latin words like I don't understand, but whatever. That one's pretty. And you go through these articles like top 10 plants to grow in sandy soil, and just go through them. And I'm seeing things like, well, that's kind of pretty. I wonder, well, what's the deal with this stuff? And 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 on and on and on. Like, wow, there's a particular kind of thyme, the herb that you can actually grow. Of course, you can grow this stuff yourself, right? But there's this stuff that you can actually just grow yourself from seed if you wanted to, and you can just cover your backyard in it. So so there's one thing called creeping thyme, which it's ornamental essentially. You can do stuff with it, but it's this kind of half a foot, like 15 centimeter thing, and it grows into this mat. This kind of spreads everywhere, and that's the kind of stuff that you would want to grow. It's not too tall, and if it's not too tall, it doesn't need really deep roots. So if you are thinking about the future of, well, I've got to dig all this stuff up in case I want to do something better with my lawn, well, you don't want something tall. You don't want to start growing bushes out there because from experience, digging up bushes really stinks. So this stuff, yeah, it's half a foot. Okay, that's perfect. And it's thick, and it grows broadly, and it grows on its own. Okay, that's awesome, because as soon as you got stuff that does that, it will crowd out dandelions as a start. Because dandelions don't take their leaves and they don't push their leaves up. They push their leaves broadly across. So if there's other plants that kind of poke up around their leaves and get a little bit taller and then weave themselves together so they're thick, they will crowd out the light and they will kill dandelions, or they'll shrivel them up and they'll die after a little while, right? And dandelions will try to poke up and they'll try to bring their little seed pods up, and you can just find them from that and hunt them down and just tear out their leaves for all it matters. You don't necessarily have to pull up their roots or anything. So something like a creeping plant like this would be awesome. And then you'd have to deal with all the really, really tall weeds, the ones that get like shoulder height. And those, I've got those, and they're actually remarkably, well, okay. Nothing is easy, but thanks to a water weeder, they are remarkably easy to pull up, even in the sandy soil, because they don't have really, really deep roots. And so, like, huh. And I can say, hey, I've got thyme in my backyard, and people will go, I've heard that word. That's awesome. And I'm looking from article to article, and some of them are really nice. And it's like, well, you can lily of the valley. Well, that's cool. Creeping juniper. dead nettle. I can't even pronounce that one. and actually, wow, that's really good. Now the thing is, you might get this list of top X for whatever, and then you have to think about, and that's the next thing. I'm in Canada, so we have to think about the cold. And it's not like it's the old joke that Canada is cold. Well, no, not really, because we all live to the south, and there's lots of places in, for example, the United States that are brutal, just brutal. So we have lots of different climate zones in Canada, but you have to know where you are, and you have to know what your hottest summers are and what your coldest winters are. If you're going to get something like a perennial, which is something that lasts, I think the labeling is if it lasts on its own for more than 2 years. So if it's 3 or more years, and if it's something like I think it's like a peony, then it'll do more than 10, maybe even 30 years if you plant it and it just keeps going and going. But and I want something like that for lower maintenance, right? That's the dream. I'm not going to reseed every single, I don't know, spring, I guess. It depends on the plant. So you have to, so you can check up this and then look at soil type. Okay, filter by soil type. And so maybe you'll get, a dozen. And then, of course, you want to pick the pretty ones. So you're going to emit a bunch. But I started looking for the word cold to see if it survives cold or cool climate, to make sure it'll live through our winter. If it's a perennial, it needs to live through the winter. Then I need to make sure that it can handle sunny, because I've got a lot of sun in one area, and hopefully it'll handle partly sunny. Now, if in the early morning there's a side of your house that is totally in a shadow, right? And that side of your house only sees sun from noon on, so it's right in the way. So it gets half the day of sun. That's partly sunny. Some plants will not like that very much because they want that morning light. Some plants may or may not like that because it might be cooler, and they might want it to be as warm as possible because that's what they're like. Some plants will like it, so no. And I've got half and half is what my yard's got. I've got one area that's open to full sun all day, and another that's shaded for half the day. And so I would need, if I wanted consistency, which maybe I shouldn't, I would want a plant that can do both. Maybe it won't be so strong in partial light, but is very strong in full light, and I'll grow it up on one side. Maybe, right? And so I've got a bunch of names for stuff, but I think the thing that I'm going to settle on is called John Creech. It's named after the guy that discovered it. That's its nickname. It's Sedum spurium. Man, fonts make things hard to read. And it does flower, and the flowers are nice and interesting, but flowers don't happen all the time. So you should know that the plant looks good when it's not flowered. And you need to think about what happens if it sheds the flowers or if it makes berries or something weird like that. And it's like, okay, well, do butterflies like it? Do hummingbirds like it? Do bees like it? You want some of these things, and maybe you don't want some of these things. And so if you hate birds, then don't grow stuff that's tasty for birds. Like, really easy. If you're allergic to bees, and you're really scared, then stay inside. But there are certain combinations of things that are particularly attractive, so you need to make that decision. So because I want something low maintenance, I need to think about what happens to the flowers when they die off, and maybe just plant a little bit and you'll find out that year. Or maybe you need to find somebody's YouTube channel where they're growing this kind of stuff and they can show you at different times of year. But when this stuff isn't flowering, it actually looks really cool. It's got really nice leaves. And so I think this is appropriate, at least along one fence of mine. And I can grow it and it won't be a complete disaster. And I think it'll be easy to dig up if I ever need to, clear that area for some reason, right? Like if you're replacing fence posts and this kind of thing, if you grow bushes right up against your fence, best of luck, because you got to dig a lot of stuff out. And then once you've dug a lot of stuff out, now what? Now you've got these holes and these bare patches right up against your fence. That, what are you going to do? Replant bushes? Well, they're going to take a while. So it's, if and okay, from experience, because we tried transplanting lavender, it just doesn't really, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Um, yeah, you'd be better off taking cuttings, really carefully taking cuttings and using that to grow totally new bushes than try to actually transplant bushes. Because, mind you, I don't know what I'm doing. So other people who do, maybe they will actually have success. I know somebody somewhere is like, oh, it's so easy. Yeah, not for me. I have a black thumb.
How'd you even? Which soil did you take? The one from your potting plants, or
Sorry?
the soil you took to transplant the lavender?
Okay, so I had access to two kinds of soil. So I had soil from where I dug up the lavender, and I left the roots in the clump as much as I could. I probably loosened it up way more than I ought to have, but so I took that. One of them I used 100% backyard soil, or 100% its yard soil, and so that's how I have it in a kind of a pot. And for another plant, I did some of that, like it came with a bunch, and then I used potting mix for it. And so the one with potting mix is probably just going to die. Some of it is alive, and the one with just its own soil is also mostly dying, but some of it's alive. I know that I used the wrong soil for one of them.
And the watering, it's actually receiving water as opposed to none.
Well, so that's the thing. Lavender does not like to be watered.
Huh.
So when transplanting, you have to water, because if you're transplanting something into dry soil, you got to water it thoroughly, because that dry soil is just going to suck the life out of the roots. And if you're transplanting something like lavender, requires a really well packed soil. So, and that was something I didn't 100% guarantee. I should have been stepping on the plants to, not on the plant, but around the roots to make sure that it's really packed.
Take that, plant.
Grow if you know it's good for you.
Grow, or I'll step on you more.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Wait, what?
And so if there's pocketings in air, pocketings of air, pockets of air will actually cause the roots to die off. And so I know I've got a lot of that going on. And so I kind of understood that up front. And this is a bit of an experiment, and maybe I'll do it again, and maybe I will just go and buy lavender plants, because I can't imagine that they're that expensive. Just get them in pots and then kind of pull them out and plant those, because that's actually not that hard. So yeah, but I mean, I don't, if I were to figure out how to transplant this into the backyard, then, and I'd be all for it. And there's a couple places I would actually do that, but I would not, because it requires full sun. So I'm not going to put it up against the fence, but I don't want to put it next to, you know how central air conditioners in houses have these external fan loud things. Well, there's some great space around that. And lavender would be shorter than that, but I don't know how it would like that area. But that would be awesome to have lavender around the side of the house there. But I don't want to grow it near the fence, for example, because, digging it up kind of sucks. At any rate. So yeah, I'll look into this particular plant, and I'm kind of enjoying the experience of learning more about this stuff. Okay. So I guess I didn't talk about a lot of that stuff. Oh yeah, correction. When I mentioned phones running BSD, I was thinking of iOS, which uses Linux. So, and again, I add these updates in the description. I talked about the morning lark thing, but I never really talked about some of the weird things. So I don't know. Did I talk about like the temperature of the house? If you wake up early, things are different, really different. And you got a strange option to. I know not many people will do it. Depends on your neighborhood and like pollution and stuff. But sleeping with your window open during the summer is actually really, really nice because there's usually a very big temperature difference. And so you can actually cool your house off. And if you're a morning lark and you wake up really early into a house that's maybe had, even if it's an upstairs window or something like that that's been open, and you've been circulating air all night, you wake up into a house that's quite cold, certainly in comparison to the day before. But yeah, it gets really cold overnight. And so it's a rather interesting experience. I really like it a lot. And so you can actually pitter patter around your house in like a robe and slippers or whatever. But the problem is, if you're up really early, and I never mentioned this before, but it really stinks if you live with people that are light sleepers. You can't really be up very early and do stuff, and even doing stuff quietly might be hard for a lot of people. So for me, if you got a squeaky house, for example, you might never notice it in your daily life until you start being a morning lark and you're getting up and you're squeaking around the house and people are getting disturbed because they find out. Like you wouldn't know that somebody's a light sleeper because you're sleeping at the same time as them. But as soon as you're up and kind of about doing stuff, you'll learn, oh, you can't do dishes or you can't pace around or you can't. And it's like there's a joke that the microwave is the loudest thing in the house, after a certain time, right? It's the 3 a.m. alarm clock. So you've got consequences for being a morning lark. It's pretty bad. And I guess lots of bullet points. So I one other thing I want to talk about the yard thing is we were digging out some not just lavender bushes but some other stuff and making giant pits that we're now filling in with other soil from elsewhere. But we had a giant pit that I actually like half tripped down. And the thing is, we didn't even notice that there was additional root structures still kind of poking out of that hole. So I bloody well hurt myself on that. And now I know more to actually clean out the I mean, it's just one more thing you need to do when you're digging something out. And that's why I just don't want to plant another bush anywhere ever again. Um, it, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with the consequence, with the mess afterwards. If you want to get rid of it or replace it or whatever, because some of these bushes they just keep growing and growing, and they start growing sideways, and they're just awful tangled messes, and they might look good or acceptable. And when you go and you look, you like part the leaves and you see the tangled mess of junk and the webs, the moths, and right. It's just, and you might not want that in your life. It is just hard to clean up after these things, and there are consequences: giant pits, death traps. And so, yeah, that also made me think about getting gardening pants because, I mean, I could have wrecked a perfectly good pair of pants doing that too. Thankfully, I didn't. There's I was thinking about this moment for the. I'll link the documentary for the previous show that I mentioned it, but regarding the Danish schools and how their reformation really helped their performance, so to speak. Like a school's job isn't a daycare. A school's job is actual education. A school's job isn't indoctrination. It isn't culture. It's about teaching things, actual things. And so there's the standard American comes by and is like, everything's so pretty. How do you do this? And then and all the teachers just scratching their heads like, well, we give them less homework. Well, but how do you? Well, we don't keep them for very long. Why? But how do you afford all this? Well, we have the same money you do. We just spend it more efficiently. Well, and the Americans talking about this school system, like, well, we had to cut corners in order to save money, so we cut out music, and the teachers are like, what? It's like you cut out art? Well, yeah, we cut out art so we can focus on, and it's like, wait, focus? I mean, and I'm thinking to myself, well, it's there really are two kinds of people, and they're the people that are just the type, right? And they're the type that they doodle, they whatever, they're the artist type. And then the type, they're the science type, they're the math type, this kind of stuff. And they have very different perspectives on lots of stuff. And you might think, okay, well, what we should have is education that's suited to that particular personality type. But it's not actually true. What you need to do is every person, no matter who they are, has to have equal exposure to stuff to learn if it's actually true that they do or don't like stuff. And the idea of removing a class of education, of quote unquote education, right? If I call art education, I'm kind of lying, aren't I? And it can be art history, and sure, that's education. Whether or not it's useful is a different discussion. Call it like learning to doodle, okay? Your drawing class, your painting class, whatever. You might think, oh, that's useless. Why? Because it won't get you a job. Why is high school about getting a job? Like, no, it's not. It's still not. It's still learning about what you're good at, what you do and don't like, and it's about rounding out a human being. And it's not about catering to a particular personality type. It's not about making that experience easy for that kind of student. So you can imagine the like science nerd kid actually pushing that student into an arts side of stuff might help round that person out and not have them be such a hyper focused, like single paradigm sort of person. It might actually help them understand that different kind of life experience, that different perspective. They might actually like some of the things. So I might be able to like interview a 9-year-old, and I can, being my smart adult self, say, oh, okay, I know everything there is to know about this kid now because I'm an adult and I know stuff. Well, first off, a 9-year-old isn't like done yet. So you might pretend like you can see the things that you want to see, but that doesn't mean anything. That's not a. So if you were dumb enough to cater the education towards what you think that student, how they would excel, you're doing them an incredible disservice, because you're going to be wrong about how you predict their personality. No matter how subtly wrong, you're going to be wrong. They're not going to be able to communicate themselves well. You don't know how they're going to like or dislike things, or whether or not, like, it's adults meddling with children when they do these sorts of things. So what we do is we create a rounded education and oppress all young people with the same stuff. And that oppression has to be well rounded, so that you can cater to enough people and you can force other people, so you can actually have a more human experience that has to include all of these things. And again, the argument is, okay, well, I mean, poetry is not going to get you a job. Dance is not going to get you a job. And okay, you know what? It's not true. That's actually just not true. And I'm trying to think of how I would have articulated this had I been, faced with that American teacher. It's like, look, it's so the education system plays pretend that through memorization that a human becomes better, like better suited, more employable, happier, whatever lies that they tell themselves. And what happens, like the very first thing that happens to a human being as soon as they've taken care of everything else, as soon as they don't go starving, as soon as they've got decent shelter, like they start going towards the real passions they have in life. That always goes into the direction of serving others in some sense, exploration or creation, the construction of some sort, or the various kinds of art. Why would you take that stuff away when you could rather freely give them to people that already have a lot of the rest of the stuff? Like a kid that's able to go to school can be given the free time where they have a school, they don't have to worry about shelter at that moment, right? They don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. And so it's possible for them to get good, solid exposure to the stuff that they would have to work for their entire lives and then retire to be able to explore as adults. That should be something that's really important to give to them when they're young. But I'm thinking, okay, well, because these are the non-artist types making these decisions. Well, what specific, concrete, employable type of, like how do the arts map over to a career? And most people would say, well, you be an artist, make paintings, sell paintings, make money. That's your career. Okay, no. How about learn to sing so you learn to talk so you can have a nicer voice. So during a job interview, you have more confidence speaking, right? Learn to write, learn even poetry, so that you can be a better writer, so you can make a better job resume, so you can do better written communications, because there's a lot of that still happens, right? Okay. Read more random literature, so you have a wider base of language to draw on, so you have more stories, so that you're more interesting, so you're a better natural storyteller, so that you can carry on with the kind of random conversations which happen. So you can just do it eloquently. In a job interview, you've got your posture, that's a dance class. You've got your mannerisms. So you've got your speaking, you've got like all of these different subtle things. They don't come from your academia. Those subtle skills, they come from the arts. They're not coming from your sciences. Your maths are not going to improve your social skills. They're not going to make you better at writing a resume. You're going to be able to get technical skills to do that, but you're not going to have the kind of eloquence when either crafting that or when actually visiting a business. There's all of these subtle things that happen, and far too many bean counters will make decisions for either budget or for education of some sort and though that sort of human can't understand the value of the arts, and so they just cut these things because they wouldn't, it never helped them, and it's because they were never interested, they were never the type, they were never exposed. And we've got a civilization problem with catering to the two major personalities. We're catering. So in writing, we've got the gardener and the architect personae. The architect is that well-groomed, carefully sculpted hair sort. The glasses and pocket protector. That would be the scientist. That would be the accountant, the mathematician. That it's off in that direction. It would be the classic. You'd often see introversion, but not necessarily. You would often see shyness, but not necessarily. And those are two separate things. And the other sort is the gardener, who the explorer, not necessarily the risk taker. It is the artist, the painter, the dancer. It's often the speaker, but not necessarily, and so on and so forth. And they don't understand the other. They don't even necessarily know that the other exists, because we can all look around and we can maybe make fun of the wild-haired sort, and there'll be a version of that for everything. There's the artist with the head in the clouds kind of artist, and then there's the scientist with the frazzled hair, right? There there are themes for humans, and the problem is that some of the themes for humans are not present when making decisions about our educational system. So they will themselves be the architect type, and they will see things as being systems that need to be crafted just so in order to have certain expected outcomes. And so an architect will look at education and they'll want systems to be in place. They want plans. They want proof. They want reproducibility. They want to have testing. They want to know that things are working a certain way. Where a gardener would have a block of funding, would make sure that the teachers are competent and safe, that they're smart, and would make sure that they have separate specialties, and would just give them a budget and go, okay. And that would be wrong, but they're both wrong. And they would need to cooperate together to have a kind of healthy mix. And because bean counters run schools, they end up looking at a lot of the arts and just saying, well, I I wouldn't have benefited from this. I wouldn't have liked it. It's a lot of money to do this. Let's just not do it. They'll spend plenty on like on football or something like that, right? Because other interests are at stake, but they'll cut music out, they'll cut art out, etc. They'll cut out the drama, and they'll put the money into better physics and better math and better etc. Anyhow, so yeah, the art side of stuff is far too vulnerable in that school situation, and too many kids have to kind of do their art on their own time, which is fine for the people that are self-driven, but for the people that aren't, they just wouldn't have proper, what we say, like professional exposure. Like a teacher is a professional, right? To help them along the way, they'd not be the fire wouldn't be in that sort, so they wouldn't explore it. So they grow into an adult that was missing that kind of thing, and that's really unfortunate because it drives a rift between people. So you'll get the architect type who gets brought through an architect school system, and they grow up having not enough exposure to gardeners, so that as adults and as adult decision makers, they can't understand that there are gardeners out there, and so it's harder for them to interact. So, like, good luck having a straight architect date a gardener. It's really hard because they don't naturally get along, because they're not just different, like they're alien. But if both had exposure to each to the other, then it's really intriguing because you've got separate interesting hobbies. But the thing is, gardeners are in a world full of architects, like just run by them. And they're the fringed artists, the quote unquote daydreamers, the time wasters that are fiddling with this stuff, that have to fill their spare time with their passions. So they end up growing into a world that they actually do understand that world. So they tend to be more rounded and get along with more different kinds of people. So we just have this hyper architect education system that it's starting to breed people that are very, how do I put it? We're breeding adults that are less understanding of alternate perspectives outside of their well architected lives, their well architected educations. Anyhow, so that's killing my voice talking about that. How odd. Yeah, for the first time in this podcast, my voice is actually sore. How much time do we have until break? 5 minutes. Okay. So, I think when we come back, we might make it short and just talk a little bit administrivia. And
So do you want to just call it now, but we can do it after the break?
do, do you want to call it now? Do you want to go a little bit longer? Well, we don't. Do we have anybody watching right now? I don't believe we usually do.
Don't think so.
No, just our usual.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we call it now? Make it short. I don't know why my voice is wrecked, but it's really strained.
Do the administrivia now and then call it.
Okay, sure. So, I guess my first question is, Minion, are you keeping a to-do list at all?
Yes.
Okay, so, and it must be getting long. My recommendation is... Yeah.
I've cleared a few things and I've added a few things, but it's not really getting that long.
Okay, so this is good. And it gets intimidating having a list. So you might just pull out one thing a week and just be like, this is the only thing that I'm working on. And then just don't look at the rest of the to-do list. So if you have to keep a separate notepad list of stuff that's like next up to do, then try that if that helps. So for example, and I want you to double check that this stuff is actually on some list somewhere.
I only have one to-do list.
Yeah. It's during the break timer. Can you make sure that there's music?
Okay.
Next, and you might have to bug me, but fixing all the titles for all of the episodes. So you would have to look at competition perhaps and get inspiration. And then, so it'll be like bunch of words, pipe, lucid indifference, and then the date or something like that. Like some other system that makes things a lot easier. And you have to remember that you have a limited amount of characters because if you want things displayed in the recommended videos column, you only have so many characters that can get displayed before it just cuts it off. So you need to discover that kind of stuff. And it's the same with the descriptions. The descriptions are awful and terrible and don't have http:// so they don't link to anything. And this is a problem. You could also mention the website in there if you want to, even though it's a
redirect.
That's fine. But if you mention it now, you don't have to go back and edit all the descriptions later. So just auditing the descriptions to clean them up better. Again, mimic success. You'll never be better than the next guy if you're always chasing them, right? If you're only ever copying somebody else, you'll only ever be as good as somebody else. Unless you add something more, you'll never surpass. Maybe you don't want to, right? Sometimes you really don't. So, for example, this podcast will never be better than podcast X, whatever better means, right? If it just does the same stuff. If it's the exact same, then it's always going to be second place because somebody else started first. That's how it works. So there's always, but for something basic like descriptions, like keywords, like whatever, right? Like bullet points, capitalization, go find a favorite active podcast of some sort and then target it specifically to understand how they do things and use that as your learning, not exactly template. So begin learning from there. And I did the new website redirect. So we talked about the lost episodes. I'm still kind of working on them. I didn't really talk about the audio cleanup much, and I'm not really sure how at this point. I think maybe one of the segments I should talk in greater depth as to how I do the audio cleanup, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. but I'll make a note of that for me. What else? That's mostly everything. Um, yeah, that's good enough for me. Okay,
Okay.
so I made arrangements to
Oh,
not. Sorry,
I guess we'll figure out the RSS thing later.
I have no idea what you meant when you were talking about that thing for the.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later.